Hello, LP Brown artists. Welcome back. This week we are going to learn about an abstract artist named Helen Frankenthaler. But first, we're going to announce the prize winners this week. I got so many tickets in here from people going to Zoom class and sharing their artwork on Schoology that I decided to pick two names. So, the first winner is a third grader from Miss Mortenson's class again. Justin H. Congratulations, Justin H. And the next winner is a fifth grader from Mr. Hazel's class, Ansu. So Ansu and Justin, you are going to receive your prizes on Thursday at supply pickup. Congratulations. So back to our artist, Helen Frankenthaler. So she was an abstract artist, and she actually created her own style of art, her own painting technique. It's called the soak stain method. So she would take paints and water them down, so they're kind of like watercolors, and pour them onto her canvas and move it around and tilt it. She dripped it, smoothed it, kind of messed with the colors, mixing them together, would pool them up. So she was really into exploring with materials and creating her own artwork. She did her own thing. Before we move on, make sure you have 2 pieces of paper and watercolor paints. If you don't have those materials, just work with what you have. Another good alternative is washable markers and a paintbrush with water. You can play with that. And if you need any materials, let me know. So before we start our art, I am going to share a book all about Helen Frankenthaler's life, and then we will begin. This book is called Dancing Through Fields of Color by Elizabeth Brown, illustrations by Amy Sakuro, and it is the story of Helen Frankenthaler. At a time when girls were taught to sit still, learn their manners, and color inside the lines, Helen Frankenthaler colored her reds, blues, and yellows any which way she chose. Helen never wanted to follow the rules. When her mother called her to the dinner table, Helen continued painting watercolors of the sunset. Instead of going to bed, Helen filled the sink with water. She dribbled in drops of ruby red nail polish and watched the colors flow. When she let the water out, she loved to watch the color swirl into shapes. During summer vacations, Helen let the waves whoosh and whirl around her, sailing her body through the tides. When her father called her ashore, she wanted to keep circling, twisting, floating. While her older sisters were in school, Helen spent her days with her mother, who nurtured her dreams. Helen read and wrote stories, made collages, and created designs with glass beads, circles, hearts, and stars in brilliant colors. She painted pictures and cards for Helen's father. Wait a minute. Am I missing something? Oh, I'm missing a whole section down there. She painted pictures and cards for birthdays and anniversaries filled with all the colors of happiness, purple, yellow, and pink. Helen's father worked long days as a judge. She couldn't wait for him to come home each day. He took her wherever she wanted to go. Most of all, Helen loved taking walks with her family in Central Park. She ran under the welcoming sky, waltzing, twirling, leaping across the lush green fields and played hide and seek among the flowering trees. When it was time to go, Helen took the colored chalk she had stuffed in her coat pockets and drew a line from the front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art through the park, across the street, and through the crowds around the corner, all the way home. The colorful line connected the two things she loved most. Helen's parents always encouraged her to blossom, express herself, paint free. In art class at school, Helen wanted to do things her way, but she had to follow the rules in order to pass. Don't sketch that way. Draw like this. Paint what you see. Helen pleased her teacher when she sketched figures, drew chairs, and painted flowers and pears like all the other students. But she wished for something different. Helen found comfort in painting seascapes. The blues and greens reminded her of summer days with her family at the beach. She made pictures of her trips to the country with bursts of orange gold paints that warmed her face like the sun. Helen followed the rules well enough to succeed in school and go to college studying painting. Her professor wanted colors separated with thick black lines, her brush marks and planes arranged across her canvas to create depth and space. Helen loved college but longed to paint what she felt inside. Painting feelings couldn't be contained in black lines or organized into clear shapes or objects. Helen dreamed of setting her colors free like she was, as a child, running without boundaries. She searched for more. After college, Helen moved back to New York, where many artists were exploring forms, lines, and shapes differently. They overlapped bands of color, thought more about geometry, and painted larger and larger pictures. Helen met an artist named Jackson Pollock, whose paintings hung in museums and galleries. The art world called him the greatest living painter in the United States. Reviewers celebrated him, fans loved him. When Helen saw his work, she marveled at how he splattered and dripped his paints on canvas tacked to the studio floor. If he broke the rules, why couldn't she? Helen exhibited her art in small shows while male painters were given larger exhibits. Critics called Helen's work too sweet in color, too lyrical, too ladylike. She worked longer and harder at her paintings, drawing strength from her memories of the country and sea. She wanted to leap into her colors, feel the colors, and be the colors. Art never let her down. Helen traveled to Nova Scotia to get away. As she walked through the fields, colors swirled around her. Cerulean blue and coral cascaded down mountains of saffron and gold. Rose pink and lavender rippled across the sky. Spring green and vermilion gushed through the sea waves. Helen felt the countryside move within her body. She saw the mountains with her arms. She heard the sea in her wrists. Could she paint the beauty she saw all around her? Could color be the painting? Helen grew brave. Back home in New York, she laid a huge canvas on the floor. She put down her brush. She blended red and yellow to make orange. Blues and yellows became greens. She mixed and mixed rainbows. Helen swirled charcoal lines across her canvas to guide her, like the chalk lines she drew as a girl in the city. With a fist full of pink, Helen turned her wrist outward and spread the paint, streams of color racing and spiraling, the paint soaking into the canvas like rain seeping into the soil. Helen grabbed a bucket of crimson and poured, setting her colors free. They ran and rushed. The colors turned into memories. Helen imagined the mountain peaks of Nova Scotia with her arms. She remembered the sea's waves with her wrists. With a sweep of her arm, she splashed green-like sea foam. Colors chitayed across the painting, merged and connected like rivers into oceans, colors into feelings. Wherever the paint landed was the perfect place to be. Grabbing a nearby mop as her partner, Helen promenaded through the puddles and pools of paints, pushing and pulling her colors together. Oranges and reds tangoed, corals pirouetted, pinks plied, yellows and blues sashayed, winding, turning, spinning. When she was done, Helen danced in that field free among all the shimmering colors of her life, extending, reaching beyond the painting into forever. Here she is with her paintings. Here's some examples. And now we will get to create our own. All right, I have my piece of paper. We're starting with creating, sorry about that squeaky chair, creating some paper that we're going to use to make flowers next week. So the flowers, we're just going to use our warm colors, and those colors make us think of like fire and summer, red, orange, and yellow. I'm going to tap a little water into each one. And then you can experiment with adding color to your paper. You can do what's called the wet on wet method. There's a little color in my paintbrush, but the idea is you do a puddle of water and then add some color to that puddle and see how the colors mix, how it bleeds into the paper. You can always add more water to see it swirl a little. The next technique you can use is more the typical approach, and it's called wet on dry. So you just have dry paper, and then you're going to add color to the dry paper and see how that's different than the wet on wet. And just have fun, like mixing colors, experimenting with adding more water, less water. You can add like a little bit of water on the edges and see if it'll spread. Next technique is called a bloom. Hey, that's my name. So you get your paper wet in one spot, so you're just painting with water. Then you're going to get your wet paintbrush loaded up with some paint. So I did red, and then I'm going to tap my paintbrush in the wet area, and it kind of spreads out like a flower blooming. Now I'm going to do a time lapse and just cover my paper in color, and you do the same. Okay, I am done covering my paper with warm colors. Again, those are red, orange, and yellow. I'm going to set that aside, and we will use that paper next week, so make sure you put it in a safe spot. Next, with my other piece of paper, I'm going to use cool colors. So those colors are blue. I'll do a little mark to show you. Green and purple. So more like winter, chilly, fall colors, ice. And again, you're going to do the same methods. You can do wet on wet. You can do wet on dry, you can do the blooms, whatever you want to do. You saw in the other video I kind of tilted my paper, let it drip. So cover your paper in blue, green, and purple. All right, my paper is covered in cool colors, so I'm going to let that go to the side and dry. Again, we're going to use those two pieces of paper next week in art, so put them somewhere safe. Now, for taking care of our supplies and our homes, make sure that you clean up your space. So the way you take care of your supplies is you're going to rinse off your paintbrush and let it dry out. You always want to make sure that the paintbrush is facing up. You'll dump out the water too, but you don't want to smush the top of your paintbrush. Next, if you mixed up any colors, you can wipe it out with a tissue or something like that. My colors surprisingly didn't get too mixed up, but you can clean off the edges and then let that air out and dry out. Set it to the side. And last but not least, use a rag and make sure you wipe down your space, because as artists, it's important that you are responsible with your materials. Okay, thank you so much, and I hope that you will share your colorful papers on Schoology. You do get that bonus art ticket if you do that. And save those two papers for next week.